what we love about your model is you're able to kind of dip your toe in the water. You're able to test markets out. You're not putting yourself on the hook for a massive mortgage in case, regulations or permitting goes south. Let's talk about that real fast, because how are you guys, analyzing permitting and regulations in these cities? Obviously, that's at the forefront of everyone's mind in the short-term rental space. I know Lake Tahoe, for example, years ago was one of the hottest short-term rental markets out there, and it went sideways, overnight, literally. So how are you guys guarding against that? How are you guys being proactive when you're talking to your students, about their own individual markets?
So, the best part about the world nowadays is that like all of this information regarding regulations, zoning, taxation, you can find nearly all of it by just doing some simple searches online. And we take people through a process to really flesh that out in order to understand exactly what are the rules of the sandbox that they're choosing to play in, right? But of course, like you said earlier, especially if you're looking to buy, you need to understand what that is going into it, because again, something that may look like a great deal, on the front end doing that analysis, if you don't understand what the rules are on the back end, then all of a sudden, the rug can get pulled out from underneath you, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to know, like when we coach and train any of our students coming through the BNB Bootcamp, is we never want a gray area. It's like maybe try it out till you get shut down. It's like, no, it's like understand and take on that responsibility as a homeowner, like back to basics, know the permit requirements, know the, sales and occupancy tax regulations and obligations, is there zoning, and this is a lot just from experience. And you could look into a market and say, you know what, they don't even have any regulations, right? It's like, yay, we're free. It's great. And it's like, well, the thing is that's not always an actual good thing. And that's happened to us. We're like, there's no regulations. We got shut down simply because a neighbor complained and they had no regulations. And they said, you know what? And we were doing a rental arbitrage deal. So we were able to get out of that deal. We didn't even own this one. And just because neighbors complained there was no regulation, we were able to get shut down. So one thing I'm trying to say with navigating regulations, guys, is that regulations are not a bad thing. They're actually really good, because then you know your parameters of what sandbox you can play in.
Yeah, and just to speak to that point, I'm absolutely pro-regulation, pro-permitting. I'm very active in the short-term rental space myself, because you know what you're getting into. What you don't want is kind of that wild, wild west. And like you said, you've got, a neighbor that's going to complain about it. I love neighborhoods that are purpose-built for short-term rentals. Obviously, those exist around the country. We dabble a lot in the Disney space. Those are purpose-built neighborhoods specific for short-term rentals. Obviously, in those markets, you're going to talk to your students about that. But permitting and regulations, guys, it's got to be at the forefront. It's got to be on the radar. Obviously, that's what you guys talk to your students about. Guys, if you want more information from Michael and Katrina and their team, go ahead and email bnbbootcamp@vipfinancialeducation.com. Include your first, your last name, and the best number to reach you at. Guys, this is what they do. You are effectively getting really a business in a box. You guys are getting all of the tools, all of the access, and you're getting direct access to these folks on this video here today that have been in the trenches. They've been doing this from scratch for 4 years right now. So you get to learn from their mistakes and obviously sharing their successes as well. So let's kind of pivot back to the regulations, guys, because that is really at the forefront of most people's minds. So let's say you do have a property, and let's say regulations or permitting goes south, which I know from experience. I've had people that had, big time, massive amounts of property in Tahoe when that went south, and then they're sitting there with what they thought was going to be a short-term rental platform, and they had to pivot. What have you guys done? Has that happened to you? And if not, what would you guys do in that position?
So again, the answer to that question is going to depend on, the variable of how you're positioned in that case, right? Now, obviously, if you've been in a market where you've made a big investment and you own the property, that could obviously have a lot more financial consequences to it than whether you're doing rental arbitrage or potentially partnering with an owner, right? So the biggest thing I would say to anyone, especially if you're getting into the ownership game, you need to make sure that that property works both as a short-term rental, but also as a long-term rental as well. So you definitely want to make sure you understand what that property can rent for in the long-term rental market. And you have to know your numbers. Does it still cash flow? Does it still produce income? Is it still going to cover all your costs if plan A doesn't work out the way you had anticipated? Now, just as a way of an example, one of our students actually ran into this exact situation. Now, they were doing more of an arbitrage type business model at the time. This was back during COVID, and the province that they were located in Canada, for a period of time while all the craziness was going on, they literally said no short-term rentals allowed in the entire province.
They allowed hotels, but not short-term rentals. It was brutal, very restrictive. Right. And that's kind of, what blindsided them as well. So kind of what you're saying in Tahoe, how it just came out of nowhere. That's the same thing, how this happened to our student down east as well in her province. And the thing is definitely learning how to pivot. So making sure you understand your options at that point. So part of the ways through here, so she had rental arbitrage. So we always coach and train our students, making sure we have good paperwork behind us. So with that arbitrage, we had good exit clauses. You always have to make sure you have that in your agreement, anything like that. If those change, you have a way out, because you can't operate as a short-term rental anymore with regulations changing if you're going down that route. If you own it, you can't really get out of your mortgage with an exit clause that way. So
you could sell the property. I mean, you do have an out and that you could sell the property. Obviously, you could have a liquid asset there, but to your point, yeah, you can't just walk away from the mortgage, of course.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the ideal one to walk away from a mortgage.
So just getting back to that student though, rather than quit, what she actually ended up doing was she went from kind of a short-term rental business to a mid-stay business. Yeah. So she actually went and did 30-day minimums. And what actually ended up happening was she actually loved it a lot more because it made her business actually a lot more passive. And because of the housing market of where she was located was so crazy, she was still renting her places at like $4,000 to $5,000 or $6,000 a month, and people were paying it because there was just no availability of housing there.
So she was making 3 to 4 net per property by doing that mid-stay, and then she was able to focus on just getting more arbitrage deals because the less turnover, right? There's less turnover moving pieces when you start doing month to month. So she just pivoted, and actually from that time, she now has a midterm stay kind of executive monthly rental business.
No, that's actually really cool. And I've not heard that from y'all before. So obviously that was part of your coaching to, help them pivot with that. But effectively what a lot of these markets do to really weed out short-term rentals is they'll put these minimum stays on there, whether it's, 30 days. I've heard 6 months, in some instances. I think that's Miami, Florida right now. Clearly they don't want short-term rentals down there. So that's the biggest way that a market's going to say to you, hey, we don't want short-term rentals. The ability for her to pivot and work in those kind of longer stays or even kind of corporate housing, it sounds like what could be an angle there as well. That's actually really cool. And I've not thought of that before.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of, not if you can get into a deal, but how you can get into the deal, and just being able to be flexible with it, I think is the biggest thing. There's a lot of regulations of primary residence, owner has to be on site. Like we have these discussions with our students one-on-one saying, this is how you can get into those deals, not if, right? So it's really just knowing the regulations, knowing what you can do and playing, like I said, in that right sandbox, in that green zone. And just, it can be done. You just need to know how.
Yeah, well, I think as far as that arbitrage and that partnership model, you're not putting yourself on the hook for a big home buy. It sounds like it really just boils down to kind of, being on top of the permitting and the regulations. And it sounds like you guys have really your bases covered as far as your agreements go. And that's part of what you guys provide with your coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as far as what's included in, the BNB Bootcamp training, we try to make it as simple as possible. Right now, we're going to preface and say, like, let's be honest, business is not always easy, but we try to make it simple, right? Mm-hmm. So, anyone that can come in, follow a very detailed set of instructions. It's kind of like watch a video, do the steps, watch a video, do the steps, watch a video, not sure what to do. Well, come to a Q&A call and we'll get you straight. So
yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing of here. Like, I don't want to have it as a lot of people are on the sidelines because of the fear behind everything, fear of regulations, fear of the unknown. And that's holding them back when there's such a great opportunity, especially in the market that we're looking at now, when it's so fear-based. This is the time to actually expand into the market when it's contracting.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is, people don't move because they don't know even how to get started. So what we do is, bring folks like you on the channel here that can provide that blueprint. Look, you're never going to have to wonder from one day to the next in your coaching program what you're supposed to be doing. You guys are always showing them how to move the needle. Obviously, guys, this is an active investment strategy. So you are buying the coaching program, going through the coaching, and then you have to go out there and implement. This is not a get rich quick. that you cannot do this by, you know, well, you probably could do it in bed. I guess you just need a, you know, a computer and a telephone, but this is an active strategy, guys. You don't sleep and make money doing this. But if you are, you know, looking to get into short-term rentals, this could be a great fit. We dropped the email below. It's going to be BNB Bootcamp at VIPfinancialeducation.com. Michael and Katrina or someone from their team is going to get back to you guys right away. Well, watch the videos below, guys. Most of your questions will be answered before reaching out to them. It may be a good fit. It may not be a good fit, but the best way to find out is by reaching out and just having that quick conversation. So, guys, thanks for joining us on the episode here today. Michael and Katrina, we're going to keep bringing you back on. We've got a great testimonial coming up, so stay tuned for that. And as always, guys, thanks for joining us, and see you on the next episode.
Thanks so much. See you then.
Take care.
Mm.